Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the South and West Plans Panel. My name is Councillor Paul Ray, and I will be chairing today's meeting. Could I remind everyone that today's meeting is being live streamed onto the Leeds City Council YouTube channel so that the public can observe the meeting without the need to be present. Could I also remind those present that this is a formal meeting. Whilst we welcome attendance, we ask that proceedings are observed quietly and without interruption. Participants in the meeting are asked to maintain a courteous and respectful manner in asking questions or making comments. South and West Plans Panel deals with the applications from the south, north west and west of the city. The aim of the panel is to hear all the relevant information from applicants, members of the public and council officers to help members of the panel make their decision. Could I now invite members and officers to introduce themselves and mute their microphone once they've introduced themselves? If I could please start from my left.
Stephen Wilkinson, Principal Planning Officer.
Good afternoon, I'm John Booth, Principal Engineer Highways.
Good afternoon, Stephen Varley, Design Advisor. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Heather Davis, Principal Planning Policy Officer with particular responsibility for affordable housing policy.
Hello everybody, I'm Andy Parnham, Councillor for Armley.
Afternoon, John Garvani, Councillor for Horsforth, substituting for Councillor Ray Jones.
Afternoon everyone, Councillor Andy Ronstreet from Kirkstall.
Good afternoon, Councillor Mahaley Francemeer for Moortown.
Good afternoon, Councillor Ankela Manaka for Bermondsey and Richmond Hill.
Good afternoon, Councillor Michael Miller, Kipix and Methley. I'm substituting for Zara Hussain today.
Good afternoon, Daniel Illingworth, part of the Plans Panel team.
Good afternoon everybody, Councillor Dan Cohen, substituting for Councillor Barry Anderson.
Good afternoon, Councillor Penny Stables from Wetherby Ward.
Good afternoon, Sam Firth from the Harewood Ward.
Good afternoon everyone, I'm Councillor Colin Campbell. There seems to be a panel with more substitutes than an England game, and I'm substituting for Councillor Finnegan.
Hi everyone, Natasha Prosser, Clark to the panel. Good afternoon, I'm Nicole Walker, I'm the legal advisor to the panel.
Good afternoon, Jonathan Carr, Head of Development Management.
Good afternoon, Steve Butler, Group Manager for South and West and Lead Officer at South and West Plans Panel.
Thank you very much for that. I think that's the first time I've ever heard you make a sports reference, Colin. Under agenda item number 1, sorry, I've lost my place. I'm trying to be funny. Moving to the agenda, could I ask the clerk to go through agenda item 1 to 5?
Thanks, Chair. Agenda item 1, there's no appeals. Agenda item 2, no exempt items. Agenda item 3, no formal late items. Agenda item 4, members to declare any interest at this point. Councillor Garvani.
Yes, I'll be stepping out for consideration of the second application as I placed an objection to it.
Thank you, noted. And agenda item 5, apologies from Councillors Anderson, Finnegan, Hussain and Jones, and substituting we have Councillors Campbell, Cohen, Miller and Garvani.
Thank you very much. Item number 6, minutes of the previous meeting held on Thursday the 3rd of October 2024. Do members accept these minutes as a true and correct record? I'll take silence as a yes unless indicated otherwise. Yep. Are members happy to move these? I'll take silence as a yes. And are there any matters arising? I'll take silence as no. Otherwise, no. Great. Item number 7, former Weetwood Police Station, 300 Otley Road, Weetwood, Leeds. Could I ask the officer to present the application?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. This application relates to the construction of a new building for residential use, the provision of internal roads for vehicle and pedestrian access and servicing, new car parking, landscaping, a substation, and new pedestrian infrastructure and modifications to the existing pedestrian and vehicle accesses. And the site is at the former Weetwood Police Station in Weetwood. So just before I start, there's just a couple of updates. So in terms of the condition list that you've got at the start of the report, condition 31, which requires details of a drainage scheme to be submitted, this condition is to be removed because it replicates condition 27, which also relates to a drainage scheme, which our drainage officers have already seen and are happy with. Condition 55, there's a typo in there that should state removal of vegetation, not ventilation. And then we want to attach one further condition, and that's requiring full details, including construction details of the balconies and balustrading. One further point to pick up on is you'll have noticed that the Appendix 3 from the DVS says it's not for publication on it. As you'll have seen within the document, there's large chunks of that redacted, so this is actually a redacted version, which are happy to go out. And then the final point is, you'll have noted from the report that this scheme was considered in August 2023 as a position statement. However, we're aware that the makeup of this panel has changed significantly since then. So this will be the first time that the majority of panel members have seen the scheme. So I'll try and do a thorough presentation for you. So in terms of the scheme, this is the extent of the application site, so bound in red. It's just over 1 hectare in site, and it includes all the buildings and land which were associated with the former police station use. And in terms of the aerial, I've put a red dot on the building there. So the former police station closed in 2020. Just so you can orientate yourself, that's Lawnswood roundabout to the southwest there. Then the ring roads to the south of the site, so that extends west to east. And then you've got Otley Road to the west, which extends up towards Adel to the north. And then there's an electric substation just to the south of the site, which falls outside of the red line plan. And you can see from that area that the site's quite well bounded by trees, and the majority of those are protected by a TPO. So you've got an existing access to the north there from the Otley Road side, and that's an in only. And then as you get further towards Lawnswood roundabout on Otley Road, that's an out only there. And then the access from the ring road to the south, that's both in and out. But obviously you can only turn left as you're going out there because it's a dual carriageway. And in terms of the wider context, again, the site's just got a red dot on it, but you can see Lawnswood Secondary School to the southwest, just beyond Lawnswood roundabout. You've got open fields associated with the University of Leeds sports pitches to the north and east, and those pitches have been fully developed now, so they're green. And you've got a residential area to the west, and that's mainly brick-built 2-storey dwellings. And you can see from there that there's no real immediate neighbours to the development. The nearest residential properties are separated by a 4-lane carriageway. And then there's Weetwood Hall and the Stables pub just the other side of the ring road to the south. So in terms of the site, this is the existing police station building. So it's 2-storey, and you can see from that picture that there was a significant degree of overground parking associated with the former use. You can also appreciate the relationship with the trees to the west there, to the left-hand side of your picture. That building in the distance there, that detached single-storey building, is currently in use. We've given it a temporary consent for 3 years for a children's cafe play space. And here's just another picture that shows the relationship between the existing building and the trees. So there's obviously a good buffer there. Sorry, it's a bit slow clicking between the slides. This is a view down from the in access on Otley Road, just looking the other way. So the tree belt, which is alongside Otley Road's on your right, and Otley Road's actually on a higher land level. I'll show you the cross sections as we get further along, but just so you can appreciate how far back the buildings are set back from the road. And then this is right from the top at the access in. So the majority of the site is flat, apart from the accesses, which bring you down to the level sites. This is the rear of the existing building, so this is like a service area. It's got very limited architectural merit. So these are some of the views in summer from Otley Road. So you can see that the trees are well bounded by, the site's well bounded by mature trees, so you get very limited views into the site, especially during the summer months. Dan, this isn't work. You might just have to do it manually. Thank you. So this is from the other side of Otley Road, looking into the site. So there you can just get glimpses of a two-storey building. So you can just see the roof really there within the tree cover. Next slide, please. And again, it just shows how dense the trees and the other vegetation are in the summer months. Next slide, please. And then in contrast, this is winter when the trees have fully shed the leaves, so you get a wider appreciation of the site there. You can see how tall the trees are in relation to the existing building, but still the building's well set back and down from those viewpoints. If you just go back one, Dan, sorry. This gives a good indication of the land level, so you can just see that top story of the building there in the roof. So it's approximately a story and perhaps a bit more level difference to the site. Next slide, please. And this is looking from the site across the other side. So the existing residential areas, which I showed you on the wider aerial, are located behind those trees, so there's not very much intervisibility between the site and the neighbouring residential development. Next slide, please. And this is just an idea of what that neighbouring development looks like. So these are three-storey brick-built dwellings. They're not of particular architectural merit. They're of a certain point in time. But as I said, the intervisibility between the site and these isn't great. Next slide, please. And then this is a view from the access looking across the university fields towards the site. So again, there's a thick tree belt on that eastern boundary of the site. Next slide, please. And again, that's just a closer up image of that tree belt. So can we go on to the next one? Yeah. And this is the existing access from Otley Road. Next slide, please. And that's the out access, so that one's closer to Lawnswood roundabouts. Next slide. And then this is the access from the ring road, so this is both in and out. Obviously, when you're coming out there, you can only turn left on that part of the ring road. Next slide, please. And that's the internal road which heads out towards that access onto the ring road, so it's wide enough there for cars to travel both ways, and it's been functioning that way for a long period of time. Next slide, please. So in terms of the scheme, the headline proposals are it's for 127 build-to-rent apartments. It's designed in one apartment block which steps in height between 4 to 6 stories, and it's got an L-shaped design and with a mix of 1 to 3 bed apartments. There's going to be new on-site green spaces. I'll go into those in more detail when we get onto that. Communal rooftop garden areas, and it also provides level access from Otley Road to the left via a pedestrian bridge, because there are accessibility issues at the moment. And I think there was about 10 or 12 steps that are counted today. In terms of parking, there's going to be 140 car parking spaces. That's 1 per unit, plus 13 visitor spaces, including a new car club space. And the proposal also includes solar panels and air source heat pumps. Next slide, please. And this plan just helps to show the vehicular movements within the site. Now, as a starting point, these are the same as existing. So the top access, top left, remains in only, and the access further south to the left remains out only, with the access from the ring road remaining two-way, and the access to the undercroft parking towards the north of the site there. So, whilst the proposal's for 127 units, which isn't insignificant, the historic police station use was 24 hours and had a significant number of peak time traffic movements. So it's not expected that this development will lead to any additional pressure on the road network. Next slide, please. This is an example of one of the floor plans. So this is actually from the 4th floor. Internally, the building's split into 3 cores, which have dedicated lifts and stairs, and the colours there denote different apartment sizes, so they're a mix between 1 and 3 bed. And the flats are all accessed from a single corridor, and if you look at the outline of that elevation there, it also helps to show you how the elevation steps forward and backwards, so there's no long long elevations. Next slide, please. This is a bit more of an in-depth look at the floor plan. So the green unit towards the top there, that's a 3-bed unit, and the yellows are 1-bed units. And all of the units within the whole site meet the minimum space standard requirements. Next plan, please. This is the ground floor plan, so this helps show you the extent of the undercroft parking, which you can see in the middle there. And 15 residential units are proposed at ground floor. And as I've outlined within the amenity section of the report, these can sometimes create a challenge with neighbouring land uses and developments, albeit it's not unusual to have ground floor units within a suburban context. So within the report, I highlighted some units have got some amenity concerns, but we think on balance, all of the units within the development will have a good quality of amenity space, given the size of the flats, the availability of on-site green space, the additional rooftop terraces, and each unit within the flats will have an individual balcony or terrace. Next page, please. So these are some of the ground floor units. It's just showing you the relationship with the adjacent land. So the ones to the western side there, although there's a path running to the west, there's a landscaping mound which helps create a buffer there to make sure that the privacy is maintained. Next slide, please. And this is the other end of the ground floor one. So again, there's a path going to the west, but you'll see from the landscaping plan that significant landscaping is proposed in front of those terraces. Next slide, please. And this is a roof plan, so you can see where the solar voltaics are going, and then you've also got the roof terraces there. So there's a range of different roof terraces, and each apartment will have access to one of those roof terraces. Next slide, please. So moving on to the elevations, that top elevation there is the view from across the field, so that'd be the rear of the site. And it shows the development stepping up from 4 to 6 stories. And I'll show you the bottom one on the next slide, but if you can see the wavy line, that's the height of the trees for context. Next slide, please. So that top image there is the same one as the bottom before, but it just shows that elevation from Otley Road a bit better. So you've got the platform green space to the front, which is clad in like the gold material. So that's going to provide level access from Otley Road. So by inserting that floor in there, you're essentially going to view the development as being a maximum of five stories to that elevation. And then the elevation below, at the bottom of the site, shows Otley Road on the left, and that's essentially a view where we started on site this morning, looking up into the site. Next slide, please. And again, that top image there, it shows with the dotted black line where that landscape platform's going to be. And the bottom image there is just from the north elevation, which we haven't covered. But one thing I'll point out is that each elevation has got the same architectural quality all the way around, which is good to achieve. Next slide, please. And this is a better section which shows you the relative land levels from Otley Road. So Otley Road's between those the second and third trees on the left, and they've drawn a dotted red line from the apex of that 3-storey building that we saw on the other side of the road, just showing you the relative height of the development. But where the building's blocked out there, so the bit that the main face that you'll see from Otley Road, that's set back 50 metres from the boundary of Otley Road, so there's a considerable visual gap there. Next slide, please. And these are some of the makeup of the elevations. So these show the development's going to be constructed of 2 bricks. You've got a red brick, which is characteristic of the surrounding areas, and then you've got a darker brick. And if we move on to the next slide, it shows some of this detail in more specific. So you've got the balconies there, they're going to have a bronze finish. The metal cladding elements to the windows, they're going to be in a matching material. And then you've got the recess to the windows and the soldier courses above the windows, adding some detail and refinement to those elevations. Next slide, please. And in terms of the landscaping, so we've got the landscape, new landscape platform, which is central, so I'll just point that out to you. So that's this area here. And then there's 2 other elements of green space, one to the south and one to the north. And importantly, from a landscape perspective, the development's respecting the existing existing mature trees surrounding the sites and enhancing those as well. So if you can see the dark green trees that are plotted on the plan, that's new planting. So in particular, the eastern side is going to get significant new planting to help increase the landscape buffer to that side. So, in terms of the landscape design, it creates a good balance between hard and soft landscape, and there's also some points of interest in there. They've got a sculptural seat with what's called a wet paw fall zone, and they've got mature trees on the landscape platform as well, which I'll show you a better image of in a minute. And in terms of the informal play provision for children, they've got elements of balanced logs, boulders, and as well as open grassed areas. But down here you've got the balanced logs elements, and I've got an image of those. You've got some boulder play around here and some more log elements up here. And if you recall, in the position statement, we had a concern that they were putting a trim trail through the trees to the western side when it was considered as a position statement, but instead of providing that, which we thought was going to have a negative biodiversity impact and limited functionality, we're now getting a commuted sum for £69,000 to make up the deficit in the green space. So we think it meets the requirements of our green space policy, and in terms of its biodiversity net gain, that's at 19% as well in terms of the habitat units, so that's another plus point for the development. So next slide, please, Dan. This is just an image of what the bridge will look like from the Otley Road to the landscape platform. So that's going to weave between the trees, and it'll also be in bronze to match the other detailing elements. Next slide, please. And that's just an artist's impression. Next slide. So I think these 3D images help you to show the depth in the development as opposed to just from the elevations. So you can see the developments of contemporary design with large window openings. You've got the bronze detailing elements there, and the elevations have got very structured and ordered facades. And you can appreciate there's going to be landscape buffers there between the green space and those units that are level there, to help with the privacy of those units which abut for landscaping areas. So overall, we think it's going to create an attractive scheme from a visual amenity point of view. Next slide, please. And that's just another image. So that's taken out there for trees, which are going to be retained adjacent to Watley Road, but it gives you a good appreciation of how the platform's going to link in with the overall development and then the overall design quality of the development as well. Next slide, please. And these are some of the informal play provision elements. So they've indicatively been shown on the plans, and we'll secure those through the final details through the planning condition. Next slide, please. And this was from the landscape impact assessment. So this is driving up from Headingley towards Lawnswood roundabout, and just gives you an appreciation of the scale of the building. But of course, it's behind the mature tree cover. Next slide, please. And again, this shows the long distance views. This is coming down from Holt Park. And again, it's the building's barely perceptible given the landscape cover and the distances. And I think there's one final one across the university fields from the north. So from those distances, it's not going to have a significant landscape impact. Next slide, please. And the developer, given that we initially raised concerns with potentially a 6-storey development abutting the open fields, they've done a range of sequential views. So you come in east to west from the ring road as you get up towards Lawnswood roundabout. So I'll just fly through those quickly. So we'll start from right to left. So right at the bottom there, because of the topography changes in the angle of the road, you don't get to see anything. Next one, please. And again, significant topography issues. The building's going to be well hidden behind those trees. Next, please. And again, there's a big mound on the right, and the trees which disguise the sites. Number 4. So this is where you start getting views of the development. So you can see the development between the mobile phone mast and the street light there. So they're going to be long-range views really at 100 metres across the field, and they'll be mitigated in some part by the lower level landscaping. But at this point on the ring road, there's no footpaths, and the cars are going to be going past pretty quick, so it's going to be glancing views. And then if we go up to the one that's nearest to Lawnswood roundabout, that's here. So you've got a better tree cover directly adjacent to the road there. But you do get standing traffic at this point, so people may look across, but the fact you can see a development is not particularly an issue, providing it's well designed and appropriate for its context. Next slide, please. And this is a street view in summer, which just shows even when standing traffic, you're barely going to see the site from this location. Next slide, thank you. So moving on to the key issues. So the report sets out the full planning considerations. In terms of the design and scale, we think it's pushing the boundaries in terms of height and design. However, mid-rise development's not uncommon within a suburban setting. We've also got the standalone nature of the site, which enables a higher density, and the scheme will not be viewed necessarily in connection with the adjacent lower storey buildings. So from the images, it shows that it's going to be a high quality design, and whilst it's one big building, it does step up and down. It comes forward and backwards with its setbacks, so that helps to break up any long flat elevations. And of course, the visual impacts helped by land levels, the tree cover, and the setback. So I think it's got a calm and ordered appearance, and the colour tones within the development don't demand attention. So we think it'll sit quite comfortably within its setting. Then moving on to viability. So in terms of the affordable housing policy requirements, policy H5 of the core strategy gives the applicants 3 options for build to rent developments. So they can do an on-site provision of 20% affordable private rent dwellings, or they can take the more traditional approach, which is on-site affordable housing provision commensurate to the affordable housing zone they're in. So that provides the mix of intermediate and social rented dwellings. So this one falls within zone 1, which is the 35% requirements. or they can do a commuted sum in lieu of the 35% option. So that would equate to 6.6 million for this site and some change. So within this policy, there's no hierarchy or preference stipulated to on-site or off-site. Unlike typical market housing where there's a strong preference for it to be on-site, the policy doesn't require it. The applicants can choose either any three of those options. So, notably, both the Council's affordable housing policy and national guidance permit departures from these contributions where they're justified by viability. And in terms of a viability assessment, it's essentially the process of assessing whether a site is financially viable, looking at whether the value generated by the development is more than the cost of developing it. And it includes a variety of inputs, including construction costs, gross development value and developer return. Now, in this instance, the developers have produced a viability assessment which states that the development is projected to make just shy of an £11 million loss. As such, the scheme is unviable and unable to contribute to any affordable housing contributions. Notwithstanding this, the applicants have made the following offer, which I'll clarify this in case it's unclear at the start of the report, but saying prior to the occupation of the development, the applicants will elect to either pay the council £700,000 towards affordable housing and complete a viability review, which is also known as an overage clause, to determine whether further payments up to a combined total of 6.6 million can be made, or at that point they'll determine whether they'll instead deliver 20% on-site affordable housing, which meets the build-to-rent policy. So, given that their viability assessment shows they can't afford to provide any affordable housing, this offer is being badged as an above policy ask benefit. And in particular, they've said that it's essentially a one-time offer and the applicant would not be agreeable or offering up this offer should the application be determined at appeal, essentially. As we do with all applications which present viability issues, we've commissioned the district valuer to undertake a third-party review of the applicant's viability assessment of the scheme. The DV found, a further 7.4 million within the scheme, but even this wasn't enough to make it viable. So they made changes to several inputs, such as reducing the construction costs, increasing the projected rents, and lowering the profit targets in line with other build-to-rent developments in the city. However, the headline conclusions were that the scheme still produces a significant financial deficit of around 2.3 million and therefore cannot provide any affordable housing as a result. And then the DV also suggested within their comments that we agree a late-stage overage clause with the applicants, which will enable the council to claw back any further monies should the scheme be more profitable, which we have done. So obviously the application presents some significant planning considerations, and ourselves and the district valuer have spent a long time assessing these and scrutinising them. Notably at its lowest point, so if there isn't any additional profit secured through the overage clause or they can't provide the 20% on site, the 700,000 offer is significantly below the 6.6 million requirement. So that's a significant departure from the expectations of our policy. And we obviously know we have an acute and immediate need for affordable housing in Leeds. However, as I've outlined before, our affordable housing policy does allow viability considerations to be taken into consideration. And the DV, in their expert opinion, have said that the scheme can't support any affordable housing provision. So, with the inclusion of the overage clause within the legal agreement, which will assess the actual profitability of the scheme, this gives us potential to secure more funds moving forward, or at least reduce the policy deficit. And there's also a chance we could lose the £700,000 offer as well as the overage agreement if the scheme does go to appeal. Albeit officers feel we have very strong planning grounds for the clause, and in officers' views it wouldn't be acceptable without the clause or the offer as it stands. So, as outlined in the report, officers on balance feel the overage clause provides some protection, and the comments from the DV justify the departure from the policy. However, we must state that the MPPF in paragraph 58 says the weight to be given to viability assessment is a matter for the decision maker, having regard to all the circumstances in the case. So you'll note that I've included a lot of financial material within the appendices, which is for transparency, but it also gives you the opportunity to draw your own conclusions in this regard if you wish to. And it also shows how in depth the district value have looked at the scheme. So overall, it's a significant negative, but it's not going to meet H5, notwithstanding that H5 allows viability considerations. However, there's also benefits from the scheme. It's a vacant brownfield site. It's going to deliver 127 units. We're going to get new planting, new green space, and above biodiversity net gain asks. The low carbon technologies and its energy efficiencies all well above our policy asks. There's also the access improvements for people with impaired mobility across the site. So overall, we're recommending the scheme for approval and seeking to defer and delegate the application to the Chief Planning Officer for approval, subject to the conditions in the legal agreement outlined at the starter report, whilst allowing sufficient time for the publicity to expire on the 6th of November. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And just for transparency, some people may have seen an extra councillor come in. They accidentally thought they were subbing and they weren't, so they left straight away. Just for transparency, could I invite Councillor Anderson to the table, who is speaking in objection to the application. Once you are ready, you will have 4 minutes to present your case.
Okay, right, thank you. I'm objecting to this application solely on the grounds of affordable. I'm satisfied that the rest of the application is acceptable despite not being perfect. You're being asked to accept 700,000 instead of 6 million. Not a good deal or a fair deal. Just look at the first 2 bullet points on page 19. Yes, there is a clawback mechanism, but it does not adequately meet the needs of this city. This site is in Adlan Wharfdale and is a 35% affordable housing provision. Not 15%, which is B across the road. Certainly not, as I call it, a derisory 700,000 when compared to actual need in the city, council policy, council ambitions, national government intentions, and the views of the combined authority as well in terms of their ambitions. I'm consistent in my argument, because if you look at page 28, the 5th bullet point, I made this point at the pre-app discussions that took place as well. So then if you go and look at pages 39 to 42, paragraphs 187 to 108, see for yourself the evidence put to you by officers, not by me, but by officers. Go to paragraph 88. It's clear that policy H5 is really about city centre developments and not those of the outer ring schemes. So we maybe need a new policy in order to address issues like this in the outer area. In paragraph 88, Roman numerals 3, has the justification been made? I say categorically no. In para 19, in 90, the offer is derisory. What could we actually spend the £700,000 in this area? Well, you might be able to get 3 or 4 houses if you're lucky, but that's about it. Not the 44 that we should get. Look at the most recent SHMA, recently presented to Development Plans Panel, to see what the needs are and, more importantly, what they are not. I agree the scheme is not viable, but another proposal by this developer or by another developer at this desirable brownfield housing site can be viable, depending, of course, on any future site price. In paragraph 98, the district value are found 7.4 million and still no substantial increase in the affordable offer. The council policies say they want to build affordables. This development does not meet these policy requirements. The council wants sufficient funds to build affordable homes. This development does not meet this policy requirement. Councillor Lennox has made it very clear in her statements and views on affordable housing. There's also, as I said, the intention and views of the national government, and to repeat myself on the WICA as well, we all need affordables. Please do not approve this application. It's not policy compliant in a major policy, not some minor policy point that can be mitigated or an alternative put in place. In our annual training, we get the message loud and clear. If a proposal is not policy compliant and there is no mitigation, you should consider refusing it. Put a marker down for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Anderson, and by the sounds of it, almost bang on the dot. So I'm going to open it up to questions from members. Questions from members to Councillor Anderson. Councillor Campbell.
Can I just ask, from your local knowledge, currently there's a housing development, I think just completed, slightly further up the road towards Bramhope. And I'm trying to get a visualisation of what 700,000 might buy us. Could you just give us a hint as to the cost of a house on that development, so I get an idea of the local?
On that development, you're probably talking about anywhere between 250 and 600,000, somewhere like that. And then if you go further along the road, because there's a number of other sites that we've had developed further into adult, they're even more expensive, and then when you get towards Bramhope, it's even worse.
Any follow-up, Councillor? Any other questions? Yeah, Councillor Firth.
Councillor Anderson, thank you for the presentation. Just wanted to ask you, you mentioned about the affordability. There's been a constant discussion about parking provision, and it was raised in the ward members' comments that parking provision was an issue since this has been going on for the last couple of years. Have you got any particular thoughts on whether that was not a concern, in potential the fact that there aren't enough, there is only one car parking space effectively per flat and only 12 available otherwise?
Yes, but again, whether I'll argue against it, but that's the council's policy is to allow this. So much as I would like to change it, I even tried to mitigate against myself by suggesting that they allow Beryl's bikes to be based here. So, and the applicants, to give them their due, were willing to consider having Beryl's bikes based there to try and improve it. But that said, I am concerned at the lack of, because there's nowhere else to park outside of the site, but there is a major bus stop just outside. And so I would say that on balance, I'm happy to say that it meets the majority of the needs. It's the affordable housing that I'm trying to make the point on, that's the one you should be considering today.
Any follow-up, Councillor? Any other questions from members to Councillor Anderson? Going once, going twice. Sold. Right, thank you very much for your time, Councillor Anderson, and for answering those questions. Could I invite the applicant representative, Tim Waring, to the table? Once you are ready, you will have 4 minutes to present your case.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Committee. Today we're bringing to you and asking you to determine a scheme that will transform this site, bringing with it significant benefits. It's an opportunity to bring about regeneration of a highly sustainable brownfield site, which lain largely vacant for the last 4 years. It involves a high-quality LED scheme, landscape LED in a generous landscape setting that both protects and enhances the biodiversity and the significant tree belts on the site. It'll deliver a broad mix of housing at a density that both aims to optimise housing delivery, but in a manner that's respectful to its environment. Your officers have not only demonstrated the scheme is acceptable in relation to all environmental and technical considerations, but also has good merits. The scheme is for BTR tenured properties, a range of sizes, 1 through to 3 beds, will meet a clear need for rental properties in this area. Your officers have also recognised the viability challenges of delivering affordable housing on this site, given the rental values that can be achieved and build costs of such a scheme. This is also supported by a district valuer. Despite this, the applicants are proposing that affordable housing is dealt with through two alternative routes. The first route is entirely policy compliant. 20% of the properties can be offered up at 20% discount market rent, as per your requirement of policy H5, fully policy compliant. Or alternatively, a financial contribution that recognises that there are viability issues on this site, but despite that, with a £700,000 initial outlay. If we start the development in 12 months' time, given the enabling, there'll be a 2-year period, and during that period, the applicant can determine whether they deliver at policy compliant or at a greater level of affordable housing provision, a commuted sum, if the market shows that actually more than £700,000 is available. So it is policy compliant in a good part. The latter option goes beyond your local plan policy, however, the £700,000 with a viability review. There is no review mechanism recognised in your policy, and the applicants, for the purpose of working with your council to achieve the best possible viable affordable housing offer, is willing to make that dynamic Section 106 offer. We hope that you concur that this scheme has both merits and support, and that you will recognise the major benefits it will deliver, meeting the acute housing needs, especially for rental properties, delivering a high-quality scheme in place of an unremarkable and largely vacant building, economic benefits to local businesses, BNG well in excess of the statutory requirements, replacing an existing low environmental performance building with a highly sustainable building which through construction and operation will exceed your council's targets, and also improved landscaping and provision of more landscaping, plus better management of the existing tree belt on the site. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Opening it up to members. Questions to the applicant. Councillor Campbell.
I wouldn't disagree with your comment about it being an unremarkable building on site at the moment, though I'm long enough in the tooth to remember when it was cutting edge design. So the world changes, doesn't it? Let's ask the obvious question. If you do what you want to do, you will lose £11 million. What's the point of you undertaking an unviable development?
That's the viability issue is an ongoing issue, isn't it? It's not set in a point in time, and that's why we've offered up a dynamic Section 106, which will enable us to take a view at a point in time at whether we continue with a 20% discount market rent, 20% of the properties at 20% discount market rent, or whether we take at that point in time the alternative route, which is the £700,000 and whatever may be available at that point in time through the viability mechanism. We're talking about a 3-year period from today until we're actually up and running. The viability review mechanism would kick in 2.5 years' time, or up from 2.5 probably to 3 years, because it will have to be undertaken at no less than 6 months before we actually practically complete the development. So at that point in time, a private developer can take the decision.
Councillor Campbell.
That's not quite the answer I was asking, or the answer to the question I was asking. You touch, obviously, as developers always do, on the affordable requirements of the council to make this thing policy compliant. And I appreciate that that's a cost to developers, and it's a cost to all developers. And so actually, in effect, what you appear to be saying in relation to that is that we, the council, should set aside our policy and, in effect, give the developer a subsidy towards building this development. But the costs cover the entirety of the development, not just the potential for providing affordable units. So I go back to the point is, from the evidence you provided for us, this is an unviable development. So why are we going ahead with it?
The decision is a business decision, isn't it, by the developer at that point in time. It's, you know, whether it's Pickard Properties or Legal and General or Aberdeen Asset Managers or another developer company, they make a decision based on their businesses at that point in time. If they look longer term, they can afford to look longer term, can Pickard Properties on a build-to-rent product. They hold the product. As you know, they've been going for nearly 50 years. They have been investing in this city for 50 years. They do some fantastic developments and they hold on to them. You can see that from, Carlton Hill, the student scheme, the Tetley Hall scheme. They are an investor here. They look at longer term. They don't necessarily look at the short term that perhaps another developer may look at and sell that product on. So it's all about their business, their business decision. They may be willing to take a lesser profit, a lesser return immediately with a longer term gain.
Any follow up, Councillor?
If I may, Chair. Yeah. I'm interested in the comment about the long term, and you make a big play of the people involved here are in it for the long term. So I suppose it's the question we have to ask ourselves is what's the long-term value of the asset? And I appreciate that the district valuer uses, in effect, a 22-year period for assessing the value of a flat. But that assessment doesn't include what I was described as the residual value. So what's the long-term value of this development over, say, a normal mortgage period, which runs, say, 25, 30 years?
I can't answer that question. It depends on the date at which the business wishes to invest, whether they've got investments in something else at the moment that they're spending their money on, or whether they're deciding to make an investment and purchase something else. They'll look at it, at a point in time when their business determines that it's right to move forward with this development. I don't actually understand the question that you're raising, Councillor Campbell.
Well, I'm slightly surprised because I've asked you it in the past.
I think you've got the non-answer you were looking for, Councillor. Councillor Stables.
So I'm just trying to get a bit of clarity on this. So when the development is built, are you going to, do you rent the properties out? Does the developer own the building and rent the properties out themselves, or are they individually sold off to different landlords?
It's what's known as a build-to-rent product. So essentially there will be a covenant on the property that says that they cannot be sold. They will be held by one company. That one company can only rent these properties out. That has a particular impact on the value of the product. So, and the build-to-rent product, it's a product that's kind of evolved over and developed over the last 10 or 15 years. The city centre is, there are many examples within this city centre of build-to-rent products now. There are very few examples of build-to-rent products in the suburbs of Leeds. It's relatively new as the build-to-rent suburban product. But again, the values, etc., are all driven by cost and rental return. So in the city centre and outer city centre, costs of construction are very similar, but rental levels are very different. So you get more rent on a product in the city centre than you would outside, and that's where the value changes. But in answer to your question, it's a rental product.
So I think I understand now. So basically then those that are investing in this development believe that the rents are going to go up over time, which will then give them the return that they're looking for longer term. That's correct. So there will be, you know, the hope is for the business that they continue to grow, or there will be a growth. And if there isn't a growth, then, you know, the scheme will not be delivered. And then, you know, the business can look at a longer term growth pattern, so you know, they can take account, can pick up properties of essentially low growth or no growth, or in fact, you know, negative growth, if they're looking at it in the longer term. Whereas an investment company such as the L&G will look at it on a much more cautious basis, and they will want to know that they are going to get a return at a particular level on that rental growth.
Any follow-up? Any other questions? Councillor Miller.
Thanks. It was suggested potentially that the off-site affordable housing contribution of 700,000 might not be there should this go to appeal and your appeal's successful. Is that correct?
If we find ourselves at appeal, which we genuinely hope we don't find ourselves at appeal, because we think that this scheme has got a lot of merit and is policy compliant. If we find ourselves at appeal, we'll have to review our position in relation to whether that's £700,000 or even the review mechanism which we've proposed, which is beyond your policy, is also on the table. It will be then for the Secretary of State to make a decision on that if we find ourselves at appeal. But that's basically, we as any business would they review their position, and we've made that very clear to the officers. We think that what is on the table at the moment, a policy compliant DMR or a viability reviewed scheme, is policy compliant anyway.
Yeah, follow up.
So is that being reviewed just out of kind of financial necessity, or is that just that out of spite that money would be taken off the table?
There's nothing out of spite. At the end of the day, we have a scheme that we're presenting to you. We're presenting it to you on the basis of what we believe is actually a very good affordable housing offer, policy compliant on one side of the coin, and also beyond your policy requirements in relation to the affordable housing contribution at £700,000. If, however, we find ourselves in front of the Secretary of State, we will have to review our position. If we have to go to appeal, there'll be a cost associated with the appeal.
Just before I bring Councillor Manaka in, I want you to be slightly clear of your answer, please, because with no disrespect, that was incredibly vague. So there is one thing with the Secretary of State saying, yes, go ahead, and actually you need to sign up to the 20% under the policy. And because the Secretary of State can make you pay a £700,000 figure you've offered. So I want you to be really clear. It's either a yes or a no question, in all fairness, and the members of this panel and the public deserve to hear it. If this were to go to Secretary of State, other than what the Secretary of State can do, which is to effectively enforce the 20%, are you saying, as an applicant, you would remove the 700,000? Yes or no, please?
I can advise you we will not be keeping that on the table. But can I just respond on the point? It's not out of spite.
With respect, you've now answered that question after several councillors have asked you. You've now clarified that position. Councillor Manaka.
Thank you, Chair. Just going back on possibly to just add on what you've just asked. And thank you for presenting everything that you did. Page 40, paragraph 92, you've spoke about the financial viability. And over there, it just goes on to say that the estimates, obviously, that those were done, but there was a submission, estimate shortly after the submission of the application. And these revised financial figures are shown, which is Appendix 3, and it shows a loss. So when you're saying it is kind of like viable, I'm trying to figure out where in the years or from where it's going to be viable. I'm just a bit confused on the viability side of this.
As it stands at the moment, the scheme is unviable to deliver the off-site affordable housing contribution at any level.
So at present, anything above zero is not a viable proposition to the business. What this applicant has said is that £700,000 is there as a goodwill gesture to the council. It's more than the policy requires, and therefore, in response to the question, will we be taking it off under spite? We won't be taking it off under spite, but it will present us with an opportunity of reconsidering everything with the Secretary of State, and the council will make the case that this was on the table at the time, and then the Secretary of State will make a decision if we find ourselves at appeal. He will say, or she will say, it won't be the Secretary of State, obviously it will be the inspector. He or she will then say that the council's position is the most appropriate way forward, or the applicant's, or somewhere in the middle. In terms of when does it become viable, I can't tell you that, because I can't crystal ball gaze, because if I could do, I'd be making some investments today on the future, but I can't tell you when it will be viable.
Any follow-up, Councillor? Any other questions? Councillor Rowntree?
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the figures that the district valuer produced here, and paragraph 97 in the report here, it says the DV considered that the gross development value of the scheme is actually £7.4 million higher than shown by the applicant. Now, obviously, I can't ask you to tell us what was in the DV's thinking with that, but is it fair to say, based on that there's a high level of unknowns and soft estimates and speculation in these figures if your figures and the DV figures can come out with that level of divergence?
Going into every viability assessment are a number of assumptions. Those are based on evidence. The evidence that we presented to the DV suggests that the figure, the final figure that the viability lies at is less than that the DV suggests, but that's down to different inputs that the two parties have put in. Now, each one is down to a professional opinion. Who's right, who's wrong? We would say that the applicant's case is the correct one, as you would expect me to, but the district valuer will say that their case is correct. Both, however, demonstrate that the scheme isn't capable of accommodating affordable housing as a commuted sum off-site at present.
Follow-up, Councillor?
Thanks. Okay, but I think you can appreciate my problem, can't you? That we've got like very different figures here, and obviously we're hearing from yourself, and we're not getting a view from the district valuer on to sort of what the reasons for the divergence might be. You appreciate there's a problem for us.
I can see that there's a difference of opinion in relation to inputs that throw out a different output, but again they're all, both of them are below the level of viability. In part, a lot of this is down to the nature of the development that we're talking about here, built to rent product in an out of city centre location. The council's policy H5 was drawn up back in 2013, I seem to remember, and I was involved in the examination of that. And the point we were making at the time was that for build-to-rent products, that policy was very difficult to deliver at viable levels for build-to-rent products. I'm not saying about affordable for general market housing. And that was for city centre schemes. And that is why a good proportion of the city centre schemes have come forward with a low level of affordable housing commuted sums, because that policy, unfortunately, is set at a level that is just unviable for this nature of... But when you take away from this, or move away from the city centre, where you have a 5%, or at the time you had a 5% affordable housing requirement on your schemes in the city centre, it's now 7%. that's one thing, but when you're looking at 35% in an outer suburban area for build to rent, the same product but with a rental value that's less than the city centre, you can see the difficulty in viability terms.
Any follow-up, councillor? Any other questions from councillors to the applicant? Yep. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll now move to questions to the officers. Questions to the officers, please. Councillor Campbell.
I don't think it's traditional. I always go first. I think the big question relates to this question about viability and the affordables. So can I just ask a question about the design? Right. Can you go back a bit? Because I'm interested in the relation on the slide. Sorry, I'm interested in the relationship between the ground floor flats at the top of the site, which I think is probably the northern end, isn't it? And the raised green area with sub-basement type parking. So it's not clear on those. What, effectively, what will you see out of that ground floor?
Yeah, so back, oh, sorry, go back
that
one.
one.
Right, one more. Oh, that, yeah, it was that one, the last one, sorry. Keep going back.
It's the one before that.
Yeah,
that one that's just disappeared.
Yeah, the one that's, just go back right one, that one there. So if you can see from that plan there, there's 2 units which are marked as sunken gardens. I'll show you that there. So there is the landscape podium. So at that point there, that landscape podium is a story above these flats at ground floor level. So what you've got there is you've got a terrace which is about 6 metres in depth, 6 or 7 metres in depth. And I think I've acknowledged that within the report that these ones have a lower level of amenity. But you'll see from like the landscape images as well that we don't have a particular like set off distance that we look for between a single story development and a window as such. Our usual requirement is for a 2-story development to be 12 or 13 metres away. We don't have a set requirement for a single story impact, which this relationship would be. So we think, based on the depth of the sunken garden there, it's south facing as well. We think that given it only relates to 2 units within the whole scheme, that on balance it was acceptable. But yeah, I think you're right to acknowledge that those units there do have some amenity concerns.
So I suppose the question I usually ask at this point is, what are the light levels inside the units, and how are they constrained by the construction of what effectively is the car park wall?
I won't be able to tell you the exact light levels, other than obviously those units within there will have an outlook of looking at that solid wall, whether they put any planting up there or anything to mitigate that impact. But it's going to be 6 or 7 metres away, which isn't it's not going to be right on top of them. And it's south facing as well, with these floor to ceiling height windows, which also helps to improve that situation. But yeah, within the report, I think we highlighted that those 2 units were the ones with the lowest level of amenity. And obviously, before someone moves in there as a rental product, they'll have the opportunity to assess whether that unit meets their needs. We're not forcing anyone to go into those.
Did we ask the developer how they might mitigate against what is a substandard flat?
Yeah, I mean, the developers made lots of improvements to the other ground floor flats by introducing all the landscaping, buffers and things like that. But those ones there, it was very difficult to make any changes, essentially, because you can't change the fixed level of the platform. That needs to come in level from Otley Road. What they have done is they've put plenty of planting the other side of that platform, so people aren't going right up to the edge and looking down on these people's terraces. So they'll be quite private terraces, notwithstanding that they'll have a wall, and the platform above them.
Well, can I just ask?
Oh, you've got to follow up. Yeah, go on. Yeah. Don't monopolise that all today, Colin, please.
I can wait. I can let everybody have a go if you like. Can I just now go to the issue of the viability, which is the key to all this. Much has been made of the 700,000 as a nice one-off gesture, or the 20%. Can we just be clear about the 20%, and what standing that has in policy? Yeah. Sorry, I'm just being put off by that bride outside who's having a photograph taken. And the second point, something was made of effectively there will be a covenant on the building which prevents resale of the properties up to a certain point. Is that a condition?
I'll cover I'll do them in order. So if you look at paragraph 88 of the report. Are you on that? So essentially policy H5 sets the policy aspirations for affordable housing, and in 2019 we updated that policy as a council, and we included a separate section specifically for build to rent developments. So I've quoted the build to rent requirements there, which is they've got the three options, and the top one is providing the 20% affordable rent, and that's actually the government's preferred model of delivery of affordable housing within build to rent developments, notwithstanding that we can do our own policy as we've done here. So if we were to provide 20% build to rent units on site, it would be policy compliant. I just want to make clear that at this moment in time, for not providing 20%, that's subject to them looking at it several years down the line and electing whether they take their option 1 or their option 2. So I wouldn't say it was policy compliant at this point in time. It could be further down the line if we choose that option. Now, I think if they have to choose between providing 6.6 million or 20% affordable on site, they're going to be choosing the 20% on site, because that's going to be a lot lower figure. But it's just making it clear that the offer at the moment, it's they'll either provide the 700,000 with an overage clause, or they'll elect to provide 20% on site. But we haven't secured the 20% at this point in time. They've still got to make a decision further down the line.
So in effect, we're at their mercy as to what they decide to do at some point down the line. In effect, they're making the decision on our behalf in relation to this element.
I think what we usually do is, our usual approach would be to make them provide exactly what they could provide, then top the rest up with an overage. Now, in this instance, they've put the second part of the clause in, which is that they'd provide 20% on site if they can do. Now, we don't have a concern with that really, because that's what the policy is asking for. So if they can do that, notwithstanding that it might be a few years further down the line, we don't particularly have any concerns with that. Do you want me to move on to your second query?
Just 1 second, sorry. I think for members that you may just want to clarify that slightly more, because if they say we can provide 15% on site, would we then be asking for the rest be as a commuted sum, or would we take that on valuation at that point? I think we just need to clarify that in members' minds in a bit clearer detail, please. Let me rephrase the question. Yeah. So, if in 3 years' time they look at it and think, well, actually, we can get 10% of affordable units on site, so it's not policy compliant, what is the mechanism therefore then to get them, if we believe they can be, up to the 20% or to the financial difference? Because at the moment, you're giving a suggestion it's mix and match. What is it, please?
Yes, so there's no options within the clause as it'll be written for a mix and match. They'll either have to do the full 20% on site or provide the commuted sum with the top up overage.
Okay, that makes that clear. Councillor Stables next, please. Apologies, your second part of your answer, and then we'll come to Councillor Stables.
Second part. Can you just remind me?
Covenant.
You asked whether it would be a condition or not. We put a standard clause in the Section 106 agreement, which essentially means that if they sell off any of the units within a specified period, there's a financial penalty for that, which then comes back to us.
Yeah, I understand that. I understand that. I'm just saying, what would we be putting on this site? Would it be 20 years, 25 years?
It's, our standard's 15 years for that.
Thank you. I'll try and remember what my questions were. Originally, it was actually in response to what Councillor Campbell was talking about in terms of the ground floor apartment where they're looking out at the wall. So we can't really see on that picture what the wall is. Is that onto another? Is that the side of the next building? Is that a garage? What is it? And could that be made into a green wall, as in a living wall?
Yeah, I think they'd be able to mitigate the impact in some ways through how it's designed, perhaps through the use of colours, but I'm not sure about planting, given that it's to the north. But essentially, we're expecting that to be a solid wall, which is it's adjacent to. I think that's the cycle store there. Yeah, sorry.
So just before you go forward, I think you may have misunderstood Councillor Stables' question. I think there's a slide where there's basically like a giant grey wall on it, and are you on about that being the side of the building, or is that no? I just think clarify, because I'm not quite sure what you're referring to either.
So I'm referring to on here when what we were referring to was those two ground floor apartments where they're 7 to 8 metres and then there's a wall. On this particular view, we can't see what that wall is. So I was querying, is that the side of another building or the garages, or what is it? And dependent on what it is, could it be softened by making it into a green wall? I think you've said no because it's north facing, but presume that you can plant some plants on north facing clearly. So presumably they can do some planting.
Yeah, I think whoever moves in there could make it more attractive if they wanted to. It'd be difficult for us to specify in a condition what they needed to do, because essentially you're going to have your flat wall at the back, which is a single-storey height wall up to the platform, and the platform levels off, and that's going to be a solid wall.
So you haven't said what it is, though. What is that?
We don't have the full details of how that's going to be constructed at this moment. That'll be a condition, but I'm expecting it just to be essentially a concrete wall.
Is there another view that shows us where that is on site, so that I can't understand what that's looking at currently?
Yeah, I haven't got a view with us of that. Are you referring to like a cross section, essentially? So the two units are that one and that one there. So if you see, they've given them some slightly longer depth terraces to make up for it. These are the standard size terraces down here at ground floor level. That one there, but it's got a dual aspect, so it also has a terrace that goes out to the west as well.
Yes, sorry Steve, just to interrupt slightly. I hope this helps Councillor Stables. Above, which is the green bit, is the landscape platform above the gardens, and the wall is actually the separation to the underground car park.
Thank you, yes. And the other second point was coming on to the second point of Councillor Campbell. on on what we were talking about in terms of whether 20% affordable housing is provided or up to the £6.6 million commutable sum. So who would actually determine that is dependent on what happens in the marketplace, basically? So and I'm guessing that the planning permission, if granted, it lasts 3 years, so they can then hang on to that bit of land if they want to for 3 years until the value of the properties increases to an extent where the total value therefore is profitable. Who would make the decision at that point as to, is it the developer coming back and saying, yes, it's profitable now, we can provide 10% affordable homes, or who's, you know what I'm saying, who makes that decision?
So it'll be up to the developers looking at the market conditions prior to occupation, which of their two options to choose. But just for clarity again, they can only choose those two options. So it either has to be the 20% on site, which should be fully compliant. So even if the viability went massively up, we couldn't ask for more than 20% on site, given our policy. In regard to option one, so if we do the 700,000 plus the overage clause, which will look at the profit at the end and whether we can recoup any money out of that, we'll be getting the district valuer to look at that again to make sure it's correct, essentially. Yeah. Let me just find that point. So, all right, yeah. So in paragraph 99 as well, so the district value did some sensitivity testing, so they looked at what would happen if there was rental growth over the next 2 to 3 years. So if in here they've put, if rents increase by 10% between the date of preparing this review and the completion of the scheme, the development is fully viable based on the land having a nil value. And similarly, if rents increase by 20%, the scheme would become fully viable based on a land value of 3.5 million. So essentially, if land values increase by 10 to 15%, which there's been a very steep upward curve in private rents recently, there's a good chance that we'll be able to recoup some of that money, essentially.
Paragraph 99 suggests, but obviously this is based on opinion again, because we heard that there's a difference between our valuations and the applicant's valuations. But the DV is suggesting that the scheme would potentially be fully viable in 18 to 24 months with a baseline from August 2023. And I think the other comment was about how we would actually monitor that, which I think, and Steve might correct me on this, there will be a particular point in time where we'll be asking for that information to be submitted so it can be checked with the DV. Yeah.
Just before I bring Councillor Minacker in, at what point will that date be? Because I think that's an important consideration for members.
Yeah, that'll be finalised within Section 106 agreement, but we're looking at 75% completion, so we need to know exactly what the costs are at that point in time to give an accurate breakdown.
Okay. Councillor Minacker.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going on to page 52, planning balance, and just going on to the viability of this. To the officers, I think, I don't know whether this is a question or a comment really. Like, there's so much of the financial side of it that's kind of like not sure about it. Can I just, I don't know whether, no, Chair, sorry, let me come back onto this. Yeah, thank you.
No problem. Councillor Miller.
If the development gets built and then the floor falls through the rental market and it turns out the development, it seems, won't make any money, and they choose to not build the 20% but go with the overage, is it possible that the council could receive nothing as a result of that? Like, is it a percentage of the profit? So if there's no profit, then we wouldn't get anything.
Yeah, the minimum through option 1 would be 700,000. So when we were discussing this with the applicants, we said under no circumstances could we accept a point where the bottom level would be 0. So if we were to go down the overage clause way, it's a minimum of 700,000, and the profit above that is split 50-50, which is the overage clause that the district value has recommended.
Suppose, Councillor, that's best described as the fallback position, the 700k.
Any follow-up?
Are there any other developments that have this similar kind of clause in terms of the overage clause that we've used previously? In terms of what, I don't know, it said 50-50, but it's not something I'm familiar with being used before, but I just wonder if there's any kind of precedent for it.
Yeah, I mean, we've used overage clauses on quite a few developments. There was the one at St Mary's Church towards Cross Green. There was one at Kirkstall Hill as well. And typically, we often put them on some city centre developments as well. So it's quite common for the 106s to have this overage in there. And as I say, it was what the district valuer recommended in their expert opinions as well, to help us reduce that policy gap if we can do. But yeah, I'm not sure about the results of those schemes, because the ones I've mentioned are still being built out, so we won't know if they've been able to claw back any additional monies. But we have had some in the past where we have managed to get closer to the policy compliance.
Thank you, Chair. So you've just mentioned, I think this kind of like guided me into what I wanted to say earlier on. You've had other developments such closer to this, but you've stated that the policy H5 was compliant, but with this one, we're kind of like having a problem with that policy. Would you then say that achieving even the section 106 is even on this one, it's even going to be possible?
Well, as officers, we think there's good grounds and requirements for the overage, and the 700,000 is being offered by the applicants. So I don't think they'd offer that up if they didn't think it was possible. Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer, because obviously it's essentially the applicant's offer is the 700,000.
Yeah, I think I'm just thinking that if they're not meeting the main policy, and yeah, thank you.
Sorry, just to help a little bit, it is a risk at the end of the day, but it's not an unusual risk that's been taken on other developments where schemes are deemed as being unviable. To actually put a clause in, although it may not be specifically mentioned in a policy about overages, obviously from an officer point of view, we have to protect the council's position to try and achieve full policy compliance. So the situation you have here is that where the applicant has a fallback position of the 700k regardless of what the valuation is at the end of it. However, we then as a council want the overage clause to look at a particular point in time, which will be at 75% completion, I think Steve said, to re-look at the sums. And if actually the scheme is in more profit, we would get an element of that back from the applicant to take us further towards the full policy compliance of the £6 million it is. But the risk is you may end up with just the £700,000 at some point. That's the possibility. Or, as Steve said, the other option is potentially the 20% on site.
And just the final thing to add is, you've asked about the similar schemes, but this is the first build-to-rent development that we've had this far out of the city centre, as Tim was saying during his presentation from the applicant's side. It's usually a model that's seen in city centres, so you know, we have spent a long time looking at it with the DV, and essentially we've got nothing to model it against. It's the first one that's this far out.
Follow up, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Does that mean there's no any other developments that can be done except the build to rent? Have they explored anything else? Because it looks like the policy is not yet reached, and there's just so much. And I'm just thinking Section 106, and I'm also thinking of the roundabout that still needs. I don't know whether it's outside of this or yeah. Sorry.
I'll cover off a roundabout issue first. So, as you're aware, Lawnswood roundabout's going to have a series of improvements, and that essentially is going to help this development by improving pedestrian and cycle connectivity across that roundabout. That's scheduled to start in early next year, and that's fully funded, fully planned, so we can't ask for any contributions towards it. But notwithstanding that, given the police station use and the amount of workers that were on site, we think this will reduce, result in a net reduction in trips anyway. So I think we've looked at the scheme as it is, as Lawnswood roundabout is, and because it's using the same accesses and egresses, it's fine. We've also looked at it with the new development, and it still works fine there. So yeah, there's nothing additional that's needed in regards to those works other than we're putting in a condition for construction management, which is to make sure that if both developments take place at the same time, we've got mitigation in there to make sure there's no conflicts.
Were there 2 points to the question, or are you happy with? Yeah.
Well, I think Councillor Manaka was concerned that there was nothing to compare this with.
Yeah.
I mean, put simply, there are comparators within the city centre, which Mr Waring referred to, but this is slightly unusual in this location this far out for Leeds, but not necessarily nationwide. So it's the question that was initially raised was about it's a new product, but what you're dealing with is obviously I've said this before. I'm repeating myself a bit at other panels. It's not up for the applicant to be looking at all sorts of different proposals. It's for us to look at this proposal.
Councillor Panham.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, from a build point of view, I'm happy with the design. Well, again, I agree with everybody around the room about compliance with the policy. Bearing in mind that government preferred policy is 20% of housing, and it seems like the applicant is just trying to ride roughshod over us. So my question is to legal, and bearing in mind what Steve just said about it being new to the city but not new necessarily nationwide, do we have any precedents about what the Secretary of State might say if we did refuse it?
I don't think that's something we would have, because as Steve's explained, when it comes to viability, it really is down to what weight the decision maker puts on that. So if members decided that they wanted to, whatever weight they wanted to put on that viability, and that, for example, meant that they weren't satisfied to go with the officer recommendation, and the application ended up at appeal, then it would depend on what weight the inspector at that appeal wanted to put on the issues with the viability. So it really is a difficult situation. You're being asked to make a decision based on assumptions. We've got 2 different versions of what those assumptions should be. But what the overage clause does for members is it gives some reassurance. If you think of it like an equivalent of an insurance policy, that if things did go up, if when the development went ahead and it was found that either both or one of the viability assumptions had overestimated costs, what you're getting by that review clause is the ability to look at actual costs. So it gives you that satisfaction or that guarantee that you're not having to pin everything on what's happening now. There is that kind of second bite of the cherry to try and make sure that the best available policy compliance is dealt with at the next stage.
You're not being kind of, it's not crystallising right now. So I don't know if that's any help, but that's the purpose of the overage clause. It is a mitigation, and it is just that extra guarantee that you're not stuck with what you're agreeing to now.
And just on that overage clause, does that include, for example, if rents go up, will the council get more, if you know what I mean? Or
So it's about looking at more actual figures. So the actual costs of the development, it would look at likely rents at the time. So it's about you're redoing the whole process, but you've got more up-to-date evidence based on that particular development. And so one would assume that because you're using actuals, that you are really dealing with the real situation, rather than hoping or wondering which version of the assumptions that they're currently between the two viability assessments are the right ones, because who knows, they are assumptions. So when you do the next review, there'll be much less assumptions going on, because we'll have actual costs of what the development has included.
okay, and just finally, obviously we've got 700,000 offered by the applicant. We really should be getting 6.6. So with the overage agreement in place, if we were to agree to this, can we give any probability of getting near to that 6.6? Is there any kind of ability to quantify that?
$64,000 question as opposed to the 66 million question. We can't really guarantee that. That can only be, well, all I can refer back to is what's been said by the DV, that they think that the scheme will be fully viable in 18 to 24 months' time. But actually what additional profit that turns out ultimately, it's anyone's guess until we get to that point, for the reasons that Nicole's just stipulated, that we don't actually know the full detail of any of the costs on site in terms of the development costs. So it's not a question I'd really want to answer, because I'd be guessing.
So I'm going to ask this question just for my clarity then. So the position we're in is either, when we get to that point at 75% of the development, the developer will sit there and either they will make, from what I'm understanding, a recommendation that either we wish to go for the 20%, or we wish to pay you the 700,000, and basically whatever the district value comes back with on top. Is that the position? Because I think that's what members are trying to get their head around. What is the actual offer? Because if they come back and say from their perspective, well, actually, the district valuer says to us, actually, we think you can make £5 or £6 million worth of profit. Can they then just opt for the 20%? I think this is what members are trying to understand the mechanism.
So they'll have to opt for it before it goes back to the district valuer. As I said before, if there is quite a lot more profit into it, we can only ask for a maximum of 20% on site anyway. So they may choose that if that's the best option for them.
And just, sorry, chipping in again, and lest we forget, that is policy compliance at 20%, if that's what's offered.
So just to confirm for members, it will be for the developer to effectively put that offer on the table, and if they think, yeah, great, we can do the 20% and we hit that, happy days. They don't think it's going to be at that point where they can do the 20%. The district valuer then says how much more we get on top of the 700,000. Effectively, is that the case? I'm getting lots of nods to say yes. Does that help members? Any other questions to the officers before we go into comments? Comments, please. Who wants to comment first? Councillor Miller?
There's obviously a lot of risk associated in whatever decision we make today. My argument would be that there is less risk in not agreeing to the officer's recommendations. If the applicant had given us 20% housing, or a less derisory sum than 700,000, then I would be inclined to agree to this today. But there is a real risk that this development will be built and we will receive nothing as a result of it. The overage clause is not a sufficient check or balance against this, and you know, this is a big development. Yes, there's a, you know, it's new to this side of the city, but we are talking about, as the report says, a highly desirable area of the city, which it is likely that the scheme will make money, but the applicant, both in terms of their assessment of the profits and also their attempt, which hasn't been mentioned, to provide a overage clause which is completely in their favour, has shown that they don't wish to kind of they don't wish to do what's necessary to align with policy. It's very clear in terms of affordability this scheme doesn't meet policy, and as the report says, it's up to us as decision makers to apply what weight we want to in terms of the viability assessment, and I don't think we should give it a significant amount of weight.
I just want to add a point of clarity. We wouldn't get anything. We would get at least a minimum of 700,000, and we need to be very clear of that. Any other comments from members? Yeah, Councillor Campbell.
I appreciate that this is the first of this type of development, I suppose, outside the city centre. And those of us who sit on city plans have sat through innumerable discussions about viability in relation to these built to rent. I think it's fairly clear from the evidence that we've got is that if it wasn't a built to rent scheme, there wouldn't be a question about viability. There also wouldn't be a question about the proportion of affordables, because it would be 30. We have here a proposal for built to rent. Okay, built to rent is a slightly odd new model, and I think it's fair to say the district valuer, certainly within the city centre, has a lot of evidence of I suppose past use, precedent, rents, etc. in relation to that type of property. But it's clear that there is nothing out here. And it's a bit unfortunate the district valuer is not here, because I would have liked to ask him, her, what the base level was they were working from. Because I think all of us take the view, don't we, that Adel, let's be honest, is a highly desirable suburb of Leeds where property values are very high compared with other parts of the city. So I happen to know a couple who've recently bought a small house, 2-bedroom house in Bramley for 125,000. But as Councillor Anderson said, something similar in Adel's twice that much. So I'm always a bit dubious about the argument that we can't make money on this. And I persistently ask the question, well, if you can't make money, why are you doing it? And the answer really is, we can make money if you don't ask us to be policy compliant. So I suppose we have to ask ourselves the question, how much do we value policy compliance, particularly around affordable housing? And I've sat through dozens of council meetings where consistently members from all sides get up and say, we need more affordable housing within the entirety of the city. And yet we get developers who come back and basically say, we don't want to be policy compliant and therefore we don't want to do it. Now, it seems to me that there are two elements to this. And I raised the issue of the residual value of this building. And I think we are not taking into account the residual value of the building. So we're looking at a situation where for 15 years, this would have to be a managed, rented building. After 15 years, that would be up to the owner, and they could sell on flats. And one of the issues in relation to the valuation of this type of development is that the residual value of the flat, if you sell it on, is never taken into account. So the cost that we're being quoted is the cost of creating the building and theoretically 20 odd years worth of rent. After that, it's all profit. And I've constantly said I think we need to be more proactive, perhaps, in looking at residual values. Now, for that reason, I can't support this development because it is not policy compliant in relation to affordable housing, and I've said on more than one occasion that's always been a red line for me. I do believe that actually the developer, who's sat on this for 2 years, quite frankly, so there can't be any urgency, and we have an indication that because of property prices, if we hang on another couple of years, it'll be viable. I can't understand, well, sorry, I cannot accept that we should set a policy to try and protect the availability of affordable units and then set it aside. I think if we go through the design, the layout, the numbers, etc., I think we're all fairly confident that we're happy with the basic principle. You know, I might ask a couple of questions about those 2 substandard flats, but generally, as Mr. Varley would often say, it does what it says on the tin. It's a block of flats that you rent out. It's not cutting-edge design, but it does what it says on the tin, and therefore we're happy with that. So I think we need to make it very clear in whatever decision we make that the principle of development we're fine with, the type of development we're fine with, the numbers we're fine with. We just have an issue of the elements of this building which are not policy compliant. And I've taken into account, in my opinion, the comments by the developer in relation to viability and the comments by the district valuer, and effectively the comments from a local ward member who expressed a view in relation to house prices and accommodation prices in the area. So at the moment, I can't support this. I think the developers actually indicated between the lines that they could probably get 20% on here. And if they did, they'd get planning permission, in my opinion.
Any other comments from any other members? Councillor Panner?
I think what you just said is kind of crucial, really, to my view. This idea of setting a precedent, really, to allow planning just to go ahead and say, oh, we'll just give them the minimum. It's really difficult. But then again, not sure. I'm not sure what to decide, to be quite honest. It's difficult. I don't know what other people think. I'd welcome other people's views.
Councillor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair. I think fundamentally, for me, and I agree with previous colleagues' concerns around this, I think fundamentally for me, it is the weight we put on what the district valuer is telling us. And fundamental to that is the fact that this is a fairly new vehicle in the suburbs outside of the city centre. And therefore, almost by definition, the district valuer must have a relatively low confidence in the output figures, because by definition they can't know, because this is a new beast. And therefore I'm giving the district valuer's figures actually very little weight, in my view, in this, because there are so many uncertainties around how this product is going to perform in the outer areas. And I'm inclined to agree with colleagues, particularly Colin, that this is a very desirable part of the city to live in. That the outputs, I suspect, are going to be significantly higher than the district valuer has suggested and taken into account. And of course, that's really why the developer is doing this, because developers don't do things not to make significant profit, otherwise they wouldn't be doing it. It is as simple as that. The suggestion that a business is going to go into something to make a multi-million-pound loss is absolute nonsense. And I say that as somebody who was in business for many, many years. We have a policy, and every elected member in this city knows the importance of ensuring we get the right level of affordable housing across the city. And if we can't say we have a policy and we need to stick to that policy, then there's no point having a policy. We may as well rewrite it. And that's a political decision, isn't it? We can turn around and say, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to reduce it. But we don't. We say, this is our policy, and we're going to insist that it's stuck to or certainly moved far, far closer to. And for all the reasons I have just elucidated and putting those on top of Colin's, I can't possibly support this.
I forgot who's next, Councillor. I forgot your name. Ron Tree. There we go.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a bit disappointed to find myself in this position. And I think back 14 months, I think I was one of the few people who was present where in the last configuration of the panel when we had an initial presentation and exploratory discussion about this. And I did feel at the time that the discussion that we had potentially added quite a bit of value to what was coming out, and the overall design. And certainly in terms of what's been put in front of us today, we do have a very good, I believe, very good high specification design of buildings. But I think the points that have been raised about the fact that we could be setting a precedent here, because this is a new to the suburbs. Certainly, it's been spoken of as predominantly about the build-to-rent model, predominantly a city centre phenomenon so far. Although it is being employed in Kirkstall, which is perhaps not suburbs, but not city centre either. With so much of the years of conversation has turned on the notion of viability and the apparent contradiction that Councillor Campbell began with, simply saying, well, if it's not viable, why are you doing it? And I am very troubled by all of this, because we've spoken a lot about the district valuer, and this is like the district valuer and the reports are pretty much a party to these proceedings, and we've not had a sort of an opportunity to hear direct. I wonder, as somebody who's not as experienced on the plans panels as many members here, would it be normal or appropriate for a district valuer to attend a session like this?
Yes, we did contact the district valuer to attend, to answer the questions, because we knew it would be difficult for members to fully appreciate some of the figures and conversations that we've had. Unfortunately, this panel sits in half term, and the district valuer is telling us, because of staffing issues at their end, the likelihood of a district valuer coming forward would be January to attend the plans panel. From my perspective as an officer, having had this application for over 2 years, I thought it was worthwhile bringing it to this plans panel, because the membership has changed significantly since August, to again tease out the issues and to see what point we got to. So I understand your concerns about the absence of the district valuer. We've tried to answer the questions, and through the 2 year, well, certainly the last 14 months since August, we've tried to get into a position where, although we know we can't get complete policy compliance with H5, there was a mechanism to at least give us the option to try and get there at some point in the future. And we also brought forward other material considerations which we thought balanced it so that we could come to a recommendation for approval. But of course, as we've said before, it's up to the members to put your own weight on it. So I understand the confusion. But in some respects, yes, it would be better if we had the district value here to answer those questions.
Thank you. Would there be any mileage in moving for a deferment today so we could hear from the district valuer at a later stage?
That was phrased as a question rather than a comment, but I take the point. I'm going to take any of the comments first, because unless you're proposing a deferment to wait for the district valuer to give an opinion, are you making that proposal?
That would be January, would it?
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry, that was the latest estimate from our last contact. I mean, that could change and we might get back earlier, but that's what they'd said previously when we tried to get them here today.
Okay, I appreciate that's another I said another 2 months from where we are now, isn't it? Effectively, we were talking early January, or where did you go now? Yeah, 2 or 3 months. On the other hand, since we've had sort of 14 months since it was last before us and it's been going on, I would be prepared to move that we do defer this until January for that purpose.
So that is actually a motion put forward for deferral. Fine. Jonathan just told me that the earliest in January is the 9th, but it could be earlier than that because there's one in December as well, and obviously November.
So I've got a proposal on the table for a different motion to defer specifically. I'll take it on H5 and the viability. Do I have any seconders to that proposal? I've got a seconder to that proposal. So I'm going to put that motion to the group. So just to confirm, that would be to defer this specifically on the viability question, nothing else, unless someone wants to add that now, but I think all of our issues are around viability, to defer until the first meeting we can get the district valuer so that we can ask the district valuer the questions and concerns we have around that viability to then make a determination. Is everyone clear what we're voting on, Councillor Campbell?
I'm just thinking about the phraseology.
Yeah, I mean, they can clear it up. But,
I think, yeah, we effectively we're asking we're asking the district valuer for further information, and that it would seem to me that's what we're asking. Nicole Brazogli's got a...
Chair, yeah, the district valuer has given their information. If members want to defer so they have the opportunity to ask further questions of the district valuer, is that what's being moved? So that they can attend a panel and you can ask them in person. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, Councillor Miller, then Councillor Maker, because I really want to go to the vote this because we've got a motion on the table.
I think it would have been helpful for the district valuers to attend today's meeting, but I don't fully understand what information we're asking for that we don't currently have or that will materially change the objections that members have in terms of...
I don't think we're asking for information. It's to ask them questions around the information they've provided. Right. For a better understanding before we go to a refusal or an approval.
I don't believe that we need to ask
and then you
so
can
I'm going to...
Yeah, then you can vote the way you wish to vote on that
perfect.
one. Councillor Minack, very quickly, and then I want to go to the vote.
Thank you. Just a quick question. So this is just for the evaluation rather than the policy itself? It's nothing to do with policy.
It's intertwined, isn't it? Because what you have in front of it is an application that is not compliant with policy H5, the affordable housing. What I'm sensing is that the members just want to ask the valuers about the information that's been presented to properly understand the divergence between the two valuations that have been provided, so you can then make a more informed decision as to whether you think it's acceptable to go with the original officer motion or not. So it's a defer and delegate for you to have the opportunity to question the district valuer in effect to get a better understanding of what's been put in front of you. I appreciate completely it's difficult as this, but there we go.
Are we clear what we will be voting on? Okay. So all those in favour of the proposed ulterior motive motion? I need coffee after this. All those in favour? Yeah. All those in favour? 1,
2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
All those against?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think it's...
And all those abstaining. So would you like to sum up, please, Steve?
I think the... Sorry. Yeah, on the basis of that vote, it's 6 for deferral and 5 against to get further information from the DV and a better understanding of the viability situation. So we'll endeavour to get the DV with us here as soon as we can. As I say, at the moment, it was suggested by them that it might be January.
Thank you very much for that. Just before we move on to the next item, I've been asked for a 10-minute comfort break, so if you can be back for 22, please. Thank you for that, everyone, and thank you for the being back speedily for the comfort break. So on to item number 8, 1 York Cottages, New York Lane, Rawdon, LS19 6JH. Could I ask the officers to present the application, please?
Thank you, Chair. This proposal is for the demolition of an existing garage and an outbuilding and the construction of 2 new houses. The application is brought to Plans Panel at the request of 2 local ward members due to their concerns on impact on the Greenbelt, the impact on the appearance of the area, the impact on the setting of Cragwood Conservation Area, highway issues and conflict with the Rawdon neighbourhood plan. As seen on site this morning, the site is mainly surrounded by green fields, with the exception of a large industrial unit to the north. The site is accessed via New York Lane, which is an unmade track private road. Sorry, there's a bit of a delay with clicking to the next slide. Let me go back one. Apologies, the clicker's not working correctly. The site, as you can see, are these 2 structures here, and this is the adjacent row of terrace houses. Right, this is annoying. Sorry, are you going through the slides down there, Daniel? Okay. Yeah, I think it's working if we just... I'll just try to navigate through. This slide here shows the host property on the right hand side and the outbuildings further towards the rear of the site there. So it's this structure here which is proposed to be demolished and replaced with the proposal. This is another picture of the building which is to be demolished, and it clearly shows New York Lane to the side, which is the access to the site, and the existing parking area which lies here in the front of the photograph. This is showing the rear elevation of the existing building which abuts New York Lane. And again, this is a picture of the existing row of terraces which lies adjacent. This picture here shows the existing parking area which serves the host property, and this is the means of access into the site for the proposal. This slide here shows the existing layout of the site. As you can see here, this is New York Lane, and this is the means of access into the site which is proposed to remain as existing. And here shows the footprint of the existing buildings which are to be demolished. And this slide here shows the proposal. As I've just explained, the means of access remains unchanged, and there are 2 dwellings proposed in a tandem arrangement with the rear elevations which abut New York Lane. Both proposed dwellings have identical layouts and are proposed to be constructed in local natural stone with artstone mullions, sills, jambs and aluminium windows and doors. Slate roof towers are also proposed with integral solar panels. To date, the application has received 29 objections and 5 representations of support. 2 ward members have objected to the application. The points raised in the objections are covered in full in the panel report. However, the main theme of the objections relate to the impact on highway safety and conflict with Greenbelt policy and conflict with the Rawdon neighbourhood plan. The principle of the development is considered acceptable. The proposal comprises of the development of brownfield land which lies outside of the Greenbelt. Policy R1 of the Rawdon neighbourhood plan is concerned with meeting housing need. This policy states that the mix of housing needs provided should be based on the latest available local housing needs information. Our local plans team have stated that based on the local housing needs information, that the housing need assessment details that 196 new homes may be required to meet the demand from existing residents, of which 18% should be homes with 3 or 4 more beds. A Aside from this, demand from existing residents, 81 additional new homes may be required for new incoming people, and it is assessed about 71% of these new homes should be 3 bed or more. As such, it is considered that the proposal complies with policy R1 of the Rawdon Neighbourhood Plan, and the proposal will fulfil a housing need. Only part of the site curtilage is within the greenbelt. This slide here does actually have the greenbelt boundary etched on. So the area where the houses are proposed lies outside the greenbelt, and the area to the north of the line is within the greenbelt, but these are proposed to be the garden areas for the new houses. And it's important to note that this area at the moment is a garden for the existing house. So therefore, the land which does lie within the greenbelt isn't being developed and its use is unchanged. It is proposed to take off all PD rights through a planning condition to ensure there is no encroachment into the greenbelt. Going on to the design of the houses, it is considered that the proposals do respect the scale and the design of the adjacent row of terraces. The proposal will give the appearance of being small ancillary rural buildings, which is considered to be appropriate given the semi-rural character of this locality. The design of the new dwellings, which abuts the highway, continues the linear form of development which exists and is typical of small hamlets within a greenbelt setting. It is not considered the proposal would affect the character of the nearby the Rawdon Cragwood Conservation Area, which lies approximately 200 metres away to the south-east. Each of the proposed dwellings offers approximately 200 square metres of floor space, which is well in excess of the minimum requirements of Policy H9. It is considered that the proposed dwellings will offer the future occupiers a good level of outlook, amenity and natural light. As the proposed dwellings are located in a linear arrangement with existing terraces, there is no concerns with regard to overlooking or overshadowing. The means of access to the site does remain unchanged. However, visibility improvements are proposed. This slide here shows the access to the site via Knott Lane, and it is proposed to surface the track from this property here with cell pave, which is a grid form of paving, which essentially puts a grid within the surfacing to stabilise it and to contain any hardcore. We did go on site this morning. I did point out where this paving is proposed to start. There is also improvements to the visibility squares with Knott Lane, which is here. The development proposes 2 parking spaces for each of the new houses and 2 parking spaces for the existing and terrace house, which does meet the policy requirements of the street SPD, and also it is considered it complies with the neighbourhood plan, which does have a specific policy to ensure that our new houses provides an adequate level of car parking. The traffic generation generated by 2 new houses is considered to be minimal, and it is not considered it would cause or pose a risk to highway or pedestrian safety. In conclusion, the proposal is considered to comply with both national and local planning policy in terms of establishing sustainable development. The proposal utilises brownfield land and is of a modest scale which respects the scale and character of the adjacent properties. The proposal will make a small contribution to housing supply, and there is sufficient on-site parking for future occupiers. The off-site highway works will improve highway safety for the minor trip generation this development would create. It is therefore recommended that the application is approved, subject to the suggested conditions which are set out at the beginning of the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. There are no objections registered to speak opposing this application. Should we need it for a very specific technical reason, the applicant will be there, but we will be moving straight on to officers to the questions. So officers to questions to officers. It's been a day. Councillor Stables.
I just want to query about the improvements to the lane you're talking about. It's a particular system which our understanding is like a plastic grid with hardcore in that you mentioned earlier when we were on site. Sorry?
Carry on.
I wanted just to query that because is there a risk of microplastics from this plastic grid over time with wear that might get into the soil and to the waterways?
I'm not aware of any issues to do with the system actually crumbling. It's different. I think obviously this is a debate we've had with 3G pitches, but obviously on there the crumb is loose, whereas this it is not. Obviously there is conditions concerned with the maintenance, and we have put on a condition for the applicants to submit a condition survey to us, and in future they would have to do an update on that, and if there's any kind of erosion, you know, it would be covered by a planning condition. But the use of this lane is going to be negligible compared to, I mean, in total it's going to serve 7 houses. So I don't imagine that is going to cause any kind of issue. I'd also make the point as well, New York Lane is quite well walled, so I don't think there'd be the potential for any kind of spill to go into fields. I think even if there was a spill, it would be contained to New York Lane.
Follow-ups?
Yeah. I would say if there is another way, another system that could be used that doesn't include plastic, I think that would be preferable. With the increased severe weather conditions which we know are happening, there is... Oh, okay. So, yeah, so it's... Okay, the question would be, is there an alternative system that can the developer look at an alternative system rather than using a plastics system?
Can I ask the highways officer to join the conversation, because obviously highways have more experience of road surfacing issues than myself.
Right, thank you. These systems are, it is basically a very high density plastic mesh that is designed to prevent the track from deformation, and so the hardcore will fill this mesh and sit on top of it. So it's unlikely that, unlikely is not the word. The intention is that cars don't actually drive on the mesh. The purpose of that mesh is to hold the stone in place. So you end up then with its permeable surface, which is, you know, it's better for the lane and everything. But just looking at, I've got the data sheet in front of me. And bear in mind, I'm not a chemist, and so, but it does say on this that it's resistant to diesel fuel, petrol, leaching, icing salts, alcohol, organic solvents, etc., etc. So it's quite an inert material in that respect.
What level of hardcore would be above it, or is it? I mean, I've seen quite a few of these systems in car parks and things if it's the same type of system. And the ones that I've seen, and this might not be the same, are a plastic mesh, and then they've got something filling it in between. But the vehicles are going over the plastic, and therefore over time they do wear.
Yeah, no, I accept that, and I've seen that myself. It really comes down to the maintenance. What maintenance, because these things do need to be topped up. You've got a loose granular material inside a mesh that is going to be moved by the motion of wheels over it. So you're right, but yeah, that really comes down to what sort of level of maintenance is applied.
Sorry, I was just going to add, if you don't mind, Chair, that the likelihood for the micro, of course, again, an expert in rubber of all things, what a claim to fame that is, with the pictures, but the likelihood of contamination is at best negligible, and the car tyres going over it are probably a bigger threat.
All I would say is that isn't what I've seen in the car parks, because it was making the point that, when you get it in car parks, you see the erosion over time. So I'll go back to the original question. Could we ask the developer to use, there are alternatives. Can we ask them to look at another alternative if there's a risk of microplastics getting into the environment? Surely as a council we would like to try and minimise that effect.
If members were minded to accept the proposal by Councillor Stables, we could just change the recommendation and minded to approve it, sorry, but subject to having that discussion to seek out alternatives. And we sometimes do this when we've got these odd little questions as to whether whatever we then discuss with the applicants we bring back and discuss directly with the chair rather than bringing it to panel. So would that be acceptable to members if you were minded to approve it, that it's effectively approved in principle, deferred and delegated for negotiations on the surfing material, and then take it back to the chair for ultimate sign-off? Something like that.
Getting nods on that. Any other follow-ups, or can I go to Councillor Cohen?
Thank you, Chair. Who knew we had an expert on rubber? I don't want to know the other one. Very Halloweeny. Moving on swiftly. Although fearfully not swiftly enough.
You can sub again.
Would you? Thank you very much for the report, which was really comprehensive and really effective. Thank you. Can I just check I have understood correctly that none of the built elements of this development is on Greenbelt, and the only bit that's on Greenbelt are the current gardens that are already gardens, and there is a provision, there is the suggestion to slightly divide those. So it's I'm just checking. The car park.
That statement is correct.
Yeah. The car park's also not Greenbelt, is it?
That's correct, yes. It's outside the Greenbelt.
You said it's within the lines there.
Can I just help? Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I reminded Ian of this while we were on the site.
Yeah, sorry, I've made a slight error here in what I've just said. That is the Greenbelt boundary there. So the houses are outside the Greenbelt in this area here. This is in the Greenbelt, but the area of parking there is existing, so it doesn't create any new, more encroachment into the Greenbelt.
And sorry, I just wanted to add, Councillor Cohen, if I can, because I reminded Ian of this on the site as well. There is a certificate of lawful use for the gardens and the car parking already, so it's effectively there and agreed.
Any follow-up, Councillor Cohen?
No, that was beautifully answered, thank you.
I think someone put their hand up over there before Councillor Firth. I just want to make sure I wasn't imagining anything. No, Councillor Firth? Or was it you? Sorry, Councillor Rowntree. Yeah, you did put your hand up, and then it's you, Councillor Firth. Councillor Rowntree.
Thank you, Chair. This may be already covered within Condition 8 provision for contractors, but I'd just like to check that, assuming that permission is granted and the development goes ahead, that we have regulation that will cover the possibility of large construction vehicles negotiating a narrow and uneven road to get to the site and to get out again. Is that something that is within our provision for contractors, or like standing instructions of development? If you could explain a bit about that, please. Thank you.
Condition number 8 places a duty on the applicants to submit a detailed scheme of how they're going to build their properties. Obviously, the biggest constraint on this site is the access, so it's going to have to include how vehicles are going to go down this access, and obviously it isn't suitable for HGVs. It's impossible. It would be pretty hard to get a HGV down New York Lane, but they've got to come up with some scheme for us to assess. With our colleagues in Highways will evaluate.
Any follow-up, Councillor?
No, thanks. That's the reassurance I wanted.
Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Chair. Further to what colleagues have raised, first of all, there is mention in the objections to do with the Cragwood Conservation Area, and I wondered if you could just clarify exactly how close that is to this particular property. There was also a further objection in relation to the fact that New York Cottages are period properties made out of Yorkshire stone, and there is a condition 17 or 18 based on the external facing materials, walls and roof, and I just wanted to ask clarification in particular around that in terms of in keeping with the area it is and potentially relativity to the conservation area.
The conservation area, as I've put in the report, is about 200 metres away. It isn't within any kind of proximity of this application site. When we did go out on the site this morning, one of the members asked us to show exactly where the conservation area was. I don't know if the first aerial shot even includes it because it's that far away.
but it's 200 metres to the south-east of the site. With regards to the materials, it is proposed to build the properties out of natural stone, which obviously we do consider is in keeping with the adjacent terrace, and it's also proposed to use slate as a roofing material. The conservation area, if I could get the red, it's not even really showing on here. It's down here, where the conservation area starts. Yeah. The Cragwood Conservation Area basically covers the houses which are within the wood. So I scaled it about 200 metres.
Any follow-up, Councillor?
Thank you for those clarifications. And then on a further point, in relation to mention of HGVs, mention of the various other issues to do with the road, obviously it's unadopted and there's a placing condition in terms of works around that. Just wanted to ask the legalities around, on an unadopted highway, our powers to be able to ensure that it's returned to the condition that it was in the first place.
We've condition number 10, which is outlined in the front page of the report, the report for this application, does place a duty on the applicants to. The timing of that will be before the commencement of development, and then obviously that condition will place a duty for them to submit a condition survey afterwards. And the condition will be worded that they will have to carry out any repair works which have occurred as a result of the construction. But notwithstanding all of that, also obviously we've spoken about the fact that they are going to surface the New York Lane with the cellar pave, which I know we are going to talk about an alternative surfacing material. But obviously that is going to be an enhancement to New York Lane. So there isn't, I don't think there's any real possibility that the condition of New York Lane is going to get any worse through this development. It's the opposite. It is going to provide an enhancement to New York Lane.
Any follow-up, Councillor? No. Any further questions? Okay, moving to comments. Comments? Any members got any comments? Councillor Campbell?
Yeah, I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation because we've been out. You know, I appreciate that this is a development in green space. It's not in green belt, and I can appreciate that a number of individuals are perhaps reluctant to see it happen, and I think in the real world we might be, but it's a brownfield site, it's not green belt, it's not in the Cragwood Conservation Area, it's in natural materials, so it seems to me that we tick in most of the boxes. I would pick up the point about the access road. I do think, you know, no matter how robust plastic material is, if a vehicle drives over it, it skims off a microplastic, and there's more than enough microplastic in the world as it is. So I think I'm happy to propose it, providing we look at an alternative surface for that section of New York Lane, which doesn't involve plastic, and perhaps involves perhaps a more traditional material.
So just to confirm, that proposal is as it is, but with what Steve said earlier about it being effectively deferred and delegate with a conversation. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just wanted to confirm that Councillor Cohen has proposed that. So if you want to second that, so if you just do a summary, then we'll go to the vote.
Yeah, sorry, I did notice the proposer and proposer. I think it was Councillor Campbell and seconded by Councillor Cohen. But yeah, members are approving it in principle, but defer and delegating the release of the application subject to agreement of a non-plastic sub-base for lane improvements, and that would obviously include a discussion with the highways officer about its suitability for the traffic that's on it, but also final sign-off with the chair once we've got to an agreement with them on that. Okay.
Is everybody clear on what they will be voting on? Yep, so we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? For completeness, all those against? Any abstentions? That's done. Thank you very much for that. So moving on to item number 9. Ooh. Oh yeah, Councillor Cavani, you can come back now. So moving to item number...
Not you.
Item number 9 then. Newall Church Hall, Newall Car Road, Otley, LS21 2AF. Once the officers sat down, could I ask the officers to present?
Dan, you're not moving this, are you?
No, it's right. I've just lost control.
Have we lost the officer?
Yeah, it's mine.
Are you doing
No,
it?
I'm doing it.
Oh, you're doing it. Okay, there we go.
The case officer Lawrence is actually on leave with it being half term, so I'm just going to briefly go through members and hopefully seek agreement on the reasons for refusal for this application, because members will recall that it was at the 3rd of October plans panel for the conversion of the chapel in front of you into 2 dwellings and 4 in the little land to the rear. Obviously, it was recommended for approval by officers initially, but after thorough consideration, members resolved to refuse the application and defer the drafting of the detailed reasons to officers. Now, there were 5 issues raised by members at the last plans panel, but on reflection and consideration of what it was raised, we've come back with 2 reasons for refusal, but it actually combines 2 of the issues that the members were concerned about and the other one as a standalone. So what you were initially concerned about, the Weetwood Cottages, was loss of green space contrary to policy G6, impact on wildlife as 2, 3 adequate biodiversity mitigation, 4 negative impact on non-designated assets, and unacceptable impacts on archaeology of the site. So we're actually bringing back 1 and 2 as 1 reason for refusal and 4 as a separate reason. And just to explain the issues, so reason for refusal 1 covers the 2 points, and it was contrary to G6 and the impact on wildlife, and reason 2 refers to point 4, which was the non-designated heritage assets. Regarding member concern 3, the inadequate biodiversity mitigation, we did discuss this at some length at the last panel. Members considered it was not sustainable. We consider rather that it's not sustainable at appeal, as it would be difficult to substantiate. And the reason I say this is that the application would provide biodiversity net gain in accordance with policy G9 of the core strategy. And it's important to reiterate that as the application is submitted prior to the 12th of February 2024, the development is not required to meet the minimum 10% uplift, which you'll have heard before. However, having checked it all again today, this morning, so in effect any uplift is policy compliant, but actually from the applicant's perspective it talks about 22.91% uplift. So I think in all respects, if we were to go to an appeal on that reason for refusal, we'd struggle a tiny bit. I think it's the best way of putting it. So that's why we've suggested that perhaps isn't taken forward. And with regard the concern number 5, that was the one I think at the end of the panel I raised some concerns myself, because we knew we didn't have the West Yorkshire Archaeological Services support, because the applicant has provided a scheme to investigate and record any issues that may be under the ground in the area where the 4 dwellings were produced. The YAS have actually accepted that. So in essence, that is where we are. So just slightly flippantly, inclusion, I'd advise quality is obviously better than quantity in these respects, and we do need to give significant weight to the advice of our advisors in the respect. So I'm simply bringing forward the 2 reasons for refusal, which are on page 183, which covers 3 of the specific points which we think are defensible at appeal, and for members to agree that, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. There are no speaking rights permitted on this application. Therefore, we'll move to questions for the officers. Any questions? Councillor Rontry.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't at the previous meeting, I send apologies, so I didn't take part in the discussions there. But clearly, last time round, officers came forward with a recommendation that this be granted. This time, we've got a recommendation that on certain of the grounds it should be refused. So clearly there's sort of a shift in position there. Could you help me to understand what's behind that, please?
It's not a shift in position as such, Councillor Rontry. When the application was brought forward, it was, how can I put, marginal, finely balanced in terms of the discussions. At the last panel, members decided that they didn't accept the officer's recommendations, and we were asked to bring back the reason for refusal.
there were 5 issues, as I say, that were raised. We've looked at them carefully, 3 of which we think are sustainable appeal in it. So it's not really a change from the officers. We're just bringing back what members asked for. And if you're getting slightly confused with something happened at a previous plans panel, that was a very different situation in terms of the discussion they had there, where we felt that none of the reasons for refusals were actually sustainable, because I think that's where the concern stems from. Is that correct? Okay.
Any other questions to officers? Any comments from members? Can I have a proposer for the recommendation in the pack, please? I've got proposer Councillor Parnham, seconder Councillor Stables. I take it we're all very clear on what we're voting on because it's what's in the pack. So all those in favour? For completeness, all those against? Any abstentions? There we go. I'm not going to ask you to sum up because I've already done that. Right. Item, actually, technically, I think it's item number 10. We've jumped to 11 for some reason, but there you go. Item number 10 or /11, depending on what it says on the papers. Date and time of the next meeting is proposed to be Thursday, the 28th of November at 1:30 p.m. That concludes the business of today's meeting. Thank you for your attendance and contributions. I now declare the meeting closed, and could I request that members of the public, if they are here, make their way out of the building. Thank you.